BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the Teespring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin. This episode of Black Box Online Radio is brought to you by Rep Sports and Raze Energy. Are you a fan of energy drinks, protein shakes, and health foods? Well, I sure am. I use the stuff almost every single day. They sell Raze Energy products at my local gym, but you can have them shipped to your home. Use the coupon code NED075, that's NED075, for discounts applied at the checkout. The link is in the description box. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Wednesday. Welcome to the show. And on Wednesdays this year, I've been doing a regular segment about the Long Island serial killer. I began by talking about some of the victims and making profile episodes for them, but you guys were leaving such excellent questions and comments about this case that I wanted to respond to those in this episode here. And if there are any questions that you have or any comments you would like to leave for a future episode, you can put them in the section down below. And as always, like and subscribe if you would like to follow along with these true crime discussions. I do a regular segment every Monday about the Zodiac Killer, Zodiac Mondays, and every Friday, any subject is fair game, anything goes. So the first thing I would like to do is give a very basic introduction to how the general public has learned about the Long Island serial killer, and this was written by CBS News. Shannon Gilbert was 23 years old, and she was an escort who advertised online when she went missing on May 1st of 2010 after visiting a client in a gated community in Oak Beach, Long Island. Michael Pack was her driver. The Suffolk County Police Department ordered a search, and throughout their investigation, they discovered a serial killer's graveyard with the bodies of numerous victims. That is perhaps how most people would have learned about the Long Island serial killer, but the line that I like to say in almost every single episode is that the authorities were very well aware of a serial killer that was operating in this area. They called him the Manorville Butcher. They knew this for, well, now it's been for decades. At the time, they were talking 13, 14, maybe even 15 years. They were aware that a serial killer was operating and dumping the bodies in Long Island because the dismembered remains of several victims were found. But those are the earlier victims, beginning with the Fire Island Jane Doe in 1996. And then there's some victims that are attributed only in an alleged way. They're possible victims of this serial killer, such as Peaches Jane Doe, Cherry's Jane Doe, Baby Jane Doe, and we aren't 100% sure, but if you'd like to hear more, I have an episode about Peaches Jane Doe, and perhaps I'll make one for Cherry's in the future. So they were putting the pieces of the story together, and the first question I would like to ask is one that I said last week. I read it on KFGO News, and I was asking you guys in the audience, but it was just their challenge question, not even my own original one. How do we know that the Long Island serial killer and the Manorville Butcher are the same person? Because the Long Island serial killer is a little bit more famous for, as we said, the death of Shannon Gilbert, which is another unconfirmed case, as well as the Gilgo 4, the victims that were found, and at least 2 of the victims were wrapped in burlap, and then some of the other female victims that happened on later, such as Amber Lynn Costello. And I decided to ask that challenge question to someone whom I've connected with on Instagram, someone who runs the page Catch LISK, also known as Catch the Long Island Serial Killer. And I simply sent in that question: how do we know that the Manorville butcher who dismembered the victims and cut their bodies into pieces from like 96 to 2003 is the same serial killer who did not dismember the victims and is the Long Island serial killer? And the response that I got was, we do not know that, but what we do know is it is possible for someone to change from sloppy dismemberments to discarding the human remains, but there could be two serial killers who are using the same dumping ground, albeit ignorant of each other. And some people simply want to point out that most serial killers work independently. That was one comment that I received here on this channel, and there are definitely exceptions to that. I mean, there are the Boneyard Killers, Leonard Lake and Charles Ng, and they also had a female accomplice named Cricket. What about the Toolbox Killers? Bittaker and Norris, and there's a documentary about them on Peacock if anyone has that streaming service. Or how about sometimes when people have just an active participant that is helping them, like David Parker Ray, the Toy Box Killer, had a female participant named Cindy Hendy, his girlfriend, who helped procure the victims and acquire new victims. So there definitely are group efforts that exist in the serial killer world, and sometimes you'll even have sneakier teams like the girls from Alpine Manor, Kathy Wood and Gwendolyn Graham, two lovers who worked in a nursing home and they poisoned people. So a serial killer team is entirely possible, but I think almost all parties would be in agreement that if there is some type of group thing going on where there are just two serial killers operating, then they weren't too aware of each other. And the thing that supports that theory is the timeline. The dismemberments are only going on for this roughly 7-year stretch, 96 to 2003. I mean, maybe, right. This is all an unsolved case. And then the area then is just used as a dumping ground. So I would like to go to some of your questions and comments right here. The first one is from Inda Boyd, who says, it's very interesting that this broadcaster thinks that Dr. Peter Hackett may have been in the house with Joe Brewer at the time Shannon Gilbert was there. Joe Brewer has always been very shady to me, very off. Peter Hackett is a liar, of course. It seems promising to me. Well, these are the participants that were involved with the disappearance of Shannon Gilbert. As I said before, Shannon went to see a client. His name was Joe Brewer. She was driven there by Michael Pack. And then something happened inside Joe Brewer's house where Shannon began to behave somewhat erratically, and he even brought in Michael Pack and they tried to calm her down, but she ran away. She ran up and down the streets of the Oak Beach community, banging on doors, and it's possible that while she was just banging on doors, screaming for help, that she ran into Dr. Peter Hackett. Now, I asked the question, is it possible that Peter Hackett was the person that Joe Brewer called because he was a doctor, and if someone is seeing an escort, which more or less illegal activity, then they would call a doctor? But there is a response to that from Paul D., who says, it was well known that Joe Brewer did not get along with Dr. Peter Hackett. He would not call Hackett to help him. There are some radio interviews on the internet with Brewer discussing exactly what went down that night, and he points the finger at Dr. Hackett. So, my immediate first instinct when I read that comment was, well, what on earth would some guy say? Oh yeah, I was, trying to, see a woman for illegal prostitution, and I brought her into my home, and she had some type of emotional breakdown, and I called a doctor, and he gave her some type of drug, and now she's dead. Yeah, he's just gonna say that flat out like that. I mean, because that would risk incriminating himself in something. And to be clear, Joe Brewer has done a deposition on all of these activities, but he did plead the fifth on a lot of it. So, at first I was thinking that, right? But then I put some more thought into these comments that you guys have been leaving, and there are phone records of Dr. Peter Hackett making a call to Murray Gilbert, the mother of Shannon Gilbert, saying that he ran a home for wayward girls. Hackett would go on to deny that there was that phone call, but the phone records proved it. And then that's why Murray Gilbert would file a wrongful death lawsuit against Dr. Peter Hackett. He's the guy that you may have seen him have a fake heart attack and just fainting, by the way. And I was like, okay, if they have those phone records, they probably would have had a record of Joe Brewer making the phone call to Dr. Peter Hackett. So if I had to side with someone in this, I would say Paul D. would perhaps be correct that Joe Brewer didn't call him. And as previously stated, Shannon Gilbert was driven to Joe Brewer's house by Michael Pack, and not only did Joe Brewer give a deposition, but Michael Pack also gave one, and in his deposition he said that Shannon had bipolar disorder, and she didn't take medication regularly. In fact, sometimes she would self-medicate with drugs and alcohol, particularly ecstasy and marijuana, and I had talked previously about could Shannon's bipolar disorder have contributed to her behavior on the night that she disappeared. And we have a comment here from Emmy who says, just because someone's fucking bipolar doesn't mean that they're going to freak out like that and think that someone's trying to kill them. As we said, Shannon's running up and down saying people are after her, banging on people's doors. That's something a schizophrenic would do, or possibly a drug-induced psychotic. But that doesn't have anything to do with being bipolar. Like, honestly, considering the fact that they found all those other bodies, I just don't think that Shannon's 911 call is just a coincidence. It can't be, i.e., it has to be connected in some way. Okay, well, I do appreciate the comment, but I want to be very clear. I am not a medical doctor, but from looking into other true crime cases here on this channel, bipolar is also a psychotic disorder in addition to schizophrenia, and people on bipolar disorder frequently take antipsychotic medication as well. And, I mean, Shannon may have experienced a manic episode. And again, in my own non-medical internet-based opinion, here is a breakdown on something called bipolar psychosis. What you need to know, bipolar disorder is a mood disorder that features extreme shifts in mood during which psychosis can occur. Psychosis refers to a disconnected view of reality. A person with bipolar disorder can experience extreme shifts in mood and other symptoms. Psychotic disorders such as schizophrenia and bipolar disorder can cause delusions, hallucinations, and other symptoms of psychosis. So as you see, it's entirely possible that Shannon's mental state may have had some type of role. In fact, I'm going to be very blunt with you guys. I believe that Michael Pack drove Shannon Gilbert to Joe Brewer's house just to do business. I do not believe that Joe Brewer was the Long Island serial killer, or he had any major involvement, or that he was even trying to hurt Shannon. And we actually had another comment from Pedro Fernandez that is discussing this exact same thing. He's saying that there has to be a trigger to what made Shannon behave that way, and that is the key to the mystery. Well, I believe that Joe Brewer perhaps made a comment about Shannon's appearance that really bothered her, and something that she felt very degraded by, and that's what triggered the episode. In addition to the fact, as we said, that Shannon is self-medicating with drugs and alcohol for her own bipolar disorder, and you heard all that medical info that I read off there. So that led to her running away and so on. And I also want to be very clear. I do not believe that Shannon was killed by the Long Island serial killer. I don't know exactly what happened to her, but I admitted it's an enormous coincidence. And when I was watching the movie Lost Girls, I was even just thinking exactly what the characters in the film were saying. What? How could Shannon not be connected to this serial killer? She's the one that started the whole search. And so much evidence was uncovered because of the search for Shannon Gilbert. But I honestly do not believe she was murdered by the Long Island serial killer. And to answer the first question at the beginning about, or is there one serial killer, or are there two, a Long Island serial killer and a Manorville butcher? I am not someone who doubts the authorities. If they say that there is evidence to connect these crimes that occurred after 2003 to the Manorville butcher, and it is the same serial killer, then I believe them until there's a reason to think otherwise. So as of now, my theory is that there is indeed one single serial killer that was operating from 1996 to around 2010 or 11, thereabouts, in the New York area. Now, who? I'm not sure. Absolutely an unsolved case. But with the Zodiac killer, I talk very frequently about multiple killers. With Jack the Ripper, absolutely I talk about multiple killers. But with this one, I think the evidence is pointing toward a single killer. But not everyone agrees with me. Quite a lot of people out there actually think that there were multiple killers and that this is something that was orchestrated by wealthy individuals. Sirius B says, I think that there were two serial killers with the same dumping ground. The burlap sack ones were one killer, then the others were another killer, maybe even two killers. I'm sure that the killer or killers have a new dumping ground. The LISK case is still active, so who knows? Oh yeah, I would expect that whoever was behind these murders would have stopped committing them, or at the very least stopped using that part of Gilgo Beach as a dumping ground and discarding some of the remains there, because the authorities are definitely more onto the person than they were before. And I'm not someone who is just going to put absolutely everything up to a theory and never change my mind if the evidence goes in a different direction. If the authorities come out and say that, hey, it turns out there were two serial killers, a Manorville butcher and a Long Island serial killer, I will simply say, okay, I was wrong. But thank you for the comment from Flashcraft. From Sirius B. The next one is from Flashcraft that says, I do not think that Dr. Peter Hackett was the Long Island serial killer, but I do think he has some weird mental health issues like a lot of medical doctors do have. Now, I'm really glad that we can draw attention to this. I don't mean to say this in a way that anyone is going to misinterpret, but I've always kind of wondered about that. I mean, I have medical doctors in my family. My grandfather was a medical doctor, but I always noticed this when I would go to the doctor's office as a kid, or I even went to a doctor's physical recently, at the doctor's office, and sometimes the behavior of doctors bothered me a little bit, or you just thought that their reactions were very weird. And one time, my grandmother needed brain surgery, and we met with the surgeon, like the whole family did, and all of us just thought, wow, she's just responding in such a bizarre way, like awkward tone of voice, awkward facial expressions, and all of us had that reaction. Now, is there actually some type of mental health issue going on with that person? I have no idea. I mean, she's a brain surgeon, for goodness sakes, and she's performed successful brain surgery on my grandmother, so probably not. But I've noticed some different things that I think Flashcraft is pointing out. Again, I'm not saying anything about any specific person, but if anyone wants to weigh in with their own experiences, please do that. But for the record, I am very much aware that I need to watch what I say, because in one episode that I did on the Long Island serial killer, I said that Michael Pack was Shannon's driver, right? And during his deposition, they asked him if he went to college, and he said yes. And they asked him what kind of degree did he have, like a Bachelor of Science or a Bachelor of Arts, and he said, I don't know, I don't remember. And what I said was, I thought that was so weird that somebody, a college graduate, would forget what kind of degree he had. And I said something to the effect of, what's wrong with this guy? Is his brain fried from drugs or something like that? And I should not have said that, because everybody thought that I meant that literally. No, definitely meaning that metaphorically, but I do stand by the original claim. That's an odd thing for somebody to get, and the example that I used is someone might ask you, are you a medical doctor? Oh, I don't know. I did something at a university, but I don't know what kind of degree I have. And no, it's not that extreme. He just didn't remember if he had a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science. And Get Real says, dude, your assumptions and opinions and guessing is so terrible. State facts.
Like saying Michael Pack was on drugs because he couldn't remember something, WTF. See, I didn't actually mean that he was on drugs at the time that they asked that, or even that his brain was literally fried from drugs. I just thought that it was very bizarre for somebody to forget what kind of college degree they had. And we did have a comment from Colonel Rib who just said, yes, your comment was spot on. That's a normal thing to point out. Someone wouldn't forget that. So there's some people who interpreted that in a couple different ways. And this is a comment that once came in on the episode Long Island Serial Killer Psychological Profile, and it's from Peepo Jr. Mafia, who says, the Long Island serial killer once made a phone call. He's an older man, probably in his 60s now. He called Amanda a half-breed. That's old school racist word choice. I mean, the 60s, that could very well be true. You would imagine somebody starting perhaps in 96, they would be around age 45. That's older, but I've also talked about Charles Albright on this channel, the eyeball killer. He didn't start committing crimes until in his 50s, allegedly, right? I mean, we, to the best of our knowledge, for the ones he was convicted of, but GilgoCase.com shows us very clearly that it's possible that there were these dismembering crimes that happened as early as the beginning of the 1980s with the murder of Tina Folia. So maybe you're completely right, Peepo Jr. Mafia, that someone was committing crimes on and off throughout the 1980s and 90s, and they only learned about some of them, and then this person could have gone to jail for a period of time and then been released, and that would explain the infrequencies and dates. This is an unsolved case, so I examine many different possibilities, as do you guys in the comments section. But I also want to talk about this dismembering, about why they believe that the Long Island serial killer was dismembering some victims and leaving some victims intact. I think that it had more to do with perhaps any type of direct message that he was trying to send, because a clear theory with the Fire Island Jane Doe is that her body was dismembered because they thought maybe she had some tattoos that would have made people think about something. And it's the same with Peaches Jane Doe, who's an unconfirmed victim. And she's called Peaches Jane Doe, though, because she had a tattoo of a peach on her breast. And what I was thinking was that tattoo on her breast would have been so much easier to remove than dismembering her body would have been. Why was that tattoo left behind? And what I can only expect is that there were certain tattoos that had some type of image that the Long Island serial killer didn't want people to misinterpret, like it was a personal attack towards somebody, or maybe just the images bothered him in some way. And another point that I mention in almost every single episode, Jessica Taylor was perhaps the final mutilated victim in 2003. Perhaps, I mean, we don't really know. And she had one tattoo that said Remy's Angel, and the tattoo was cut up, but it wasn't removed. And I really thought that anyone who saw that tattoo would have recognized it belonging to Jessica Taylor. Anyone who had any familiarity with her, even someone who saw her regularly, I'm being polite with my words, they would recognize the tattoo. It wasn't disguised. The only part that was disguised were the words. So again, someone was either bothered by the name or they didn't want someone to see the words for some reason, or maybe they even thinking that it's some type of personal image, or they wanted to have some type of confusion, or they didn't want any other name associated with the crimes. I mean, a lot of it really is some guesswork, and I don't mean to do too much of that. But I definitely think that that could be a possibility, that they didn't want certain words associated with the killer for some reason. Now, as you heard there, I was talking about Peaches Jane Doe, who's an unconfirmed victim. I do firmly believe that Peaches Jane Doe was a victim of the Long Island serial killer. I believe Cherry's Jane Doe was a victim of the Long Island serial killer, as well as Baby Jane Doe, all murdered by the LISK. I simply do not think they have enough evidence to connect it, but I mean, you have these dismembered bodies found in the in the very vicinity of the other ones, and Peach's Jane Doe and Cherry's Jane Doe were both decapitated. So I just have to put them on a most likely confirmed list in my book, and if anybody has any reasons about why they think that certain victims should be counted as confirmed or unconfirmed, then I would love to read your messages down below. But we have a comment from Colonel Reb who asked something about the Gilgo 4. They are the victims that are associated with the burlap material. And Colonel Reb asked, were they found in burlap roll or were they stuffed into burlap sacks? And I want to be very clear about something. Anytime you read about the Gilgo 4 who were murdered by the Long Island serial killer, you'll most likely encounter something about how their bodies were put into burlap sacks, but it appears that that is mostly not true. Paul D. responded by saying, there are numerous videos of Police Commissioner Dormer on YouTube clearly stating that the Gilgo 4 were wrapped in burlap, meaning burlap roll, and they was not burlap bags. It was just normal burlap that comes in rolls. They were wrapped in long burlap sheets and dumped on the ground and not buried. I believe he used the burlap because it was an easy way to transport the bodies and easily dump there. Burlap would help the bodies decompose and would provide camouflage as it was the same color as the sand. Oh yes, absolutely. Those sound like some good points, and that is a big reason why they suspect that the Long Island serial killer could be some type of landscaper, a maintenance man, a gardener, maybe the co-owner of a plant nursery on Long Island. Something like that would give him access to these materials very easily. But in the psychological profile episode, I did read off some points when they said, talking about a guy who is, in his 20s to 30s at the time of the first crime, and then he would have had perhaps a seasonal job, manual labor job, very intelligent, but somewhat of an underachiever, and most likely had a college degree. They in the New York Post psychological profile, they said married or having a girlfriend, which I think is a very interesting note about a serial killer. Some serial killers are married, some are not. But I would like to get back to Paul D's comment because there's a bit more of a, I guess you would say, controversial point here about the Fire Island Jane Doe, the first confirmed victim of the Long Island serial killer. The Fire Island victim was dumped in the water. The body was found on the beach in a plastic bag. It was determined that it floated there. It's very possible these girls were killed on a boat to make sure they didn't get away, and then later they were dumped. There's a marina right in Gilgo on that road where the bodies were found. It's possible that the killer had a boat docked in the marina and killed the women on his boat. He probably then dumped the body on the road going to Massapequa. He probably lived in Massapequa. I live in Long Island and I know the area. There are very few areas that are that desolate to dump a body. The person knew the area very well. There was nothing around in that area. Well, that's exactly why some people, though, have formulated this two killers theory that I don't endorse, mind you, but that's the reason that they say that this was the most convenient dumping ground. And it is possible for a serial killer to be operating 96 to 2003, and then someone else just happened to use the same serial killer dumping ground. That would mean that there are two serial killers out there, the Long Island serial killer and the Manorville butcher. Now, were all of the victims murdered on a boat and their remains were dumped in the sea? I mean, with Peach's Jane Doe, if she is a confirmed victim, part of her remains were put into some type of trash can or a push dumpster, I guess. Trash can, let's just call it that. It's a different type of receptacle. So I definitely don't think all of them were completely dumped in the sea. And as we said with the Gilgo 4, the sand-colored material, something must have changed there. Some of them, perhaps, and it's very important to remember that with the Fire Island Jane Doe, her legs were recovered and her skull was recovered, but other than that, they really didn't find most of her body. And again, it's the same theory. They thought she may have had tattoos that the killer was trying to conceal. I really do think that either the words bother this person, or perhaps they just don't want any type of labels connected to them, or any person getting any ideas about them. But the fruit, like peaches or cherries, they don't care about. But Paul D., I thank you for the comment. We have one from Shaper Art on the same episode, the one about the psychological profile. Another great show. These were brutal crimes for sure. Admittedly, I have limited knowledge of this particular case. Most of what I have learned is from local news reports and listening to Black Box Online Radio. But I have to think that either there are two different killers or there is one killer who decided for whatever reason to stop dismembering the victims, physical limits as Ned has stated, or simply feeling that he does not need to, as the victims were not being discovered so quickly as he expected. What is really crazy to think is the possibility that there is more than one killer using the area as a dumping ground, and that way they are aware of each other, and the reason for the mutilations would be that one killer is attempting to either show up the other or to just separate themselves and stand out and take credit for their own crimes. I can mostly follow that, except it seems that the mutilated victims came before the ones who were dumped, but I mean, it's not completely exactly like that. However, I do appreciate the comment. And right now, I would like to read some of the comments that people have about the snuff ring theory. And some people talk about snuff films. Other people simply talk about the possibility of a group of wealthy men living in Oak Beach and Gilgo Beach, and they're having escorts brought over from New York City. And as that one comment said, I believe this is a group of people killing women for sport. So I want to read the first comment about that. You don't call a driver. I messed that one up, excuse me. You don't call an escort with a driver to your house to kill them for a snuff film. Sorry, that's from EEC 2021. You don't call an escort with a driver to the house if you're going to make a snuff film. Normally you'd be correct, except almost every version of the snuff ring theory that I've heard about, from you guys in the comments section mostly, is that Shannon's driver would have been in on it. They think that he is the guy who is supplying these escorts to the Thrill Kill Club, the snuff ring, that the driver, or drivers plural, is in on it, and that the women are actually being dismembered by the henchmen of this Thrill Kill Club or snuff ring. But as I said, it's I mean, again, to address the elephant in the room, multiple participants. I will talk to you all day long about multiple killers theories and all of the cases, the Zodiac, Jack the Ripper, the Long Island serial killer, and I'll show you the same problem in all of them. You have to just attribute the roles to different participants. You have to say that, okay, the driver is bringing them, the rich men are killing them, person X is videotaping them, persons Y and Z are cutting them up, dismembering them, and person -1 is scattering the bodies. You just have to attribute the roles of the crimes to different people, and sooner or later you're going to encounter some type of logical fallacy. Mamadou says, I most definitely think the Long Island serial killer is one or more high-ranking member of Suffolk County and or wealthy people. A snuff ring could very well be part of it. My suspicion lies with James Burke, Thomas Spoda, and Peter Hackett, and I'm sure more individuals are involved. The ringleader, in my opinion, may be Spoda or Burke. The next comment is from Ms. De Simone, who says, a small group of police officers off-duty invited prostitutes to a house party on Gilgo Beach, just some miles down the beach's coast, and they were the first bodies that were found, and this party occurred a few months after the first bodies were found, while the investigation was open. Another BS statement, Mr. Reporter, is that Jane and Baby Doe were proved not to be related, huh? They both had matching jewelry. Well, definitely, baby Jane Doe was proven to be the daughter of Peaches Jane Doe, actually. I don't believe I said that. Um, I don't believe I said that she wasn't unrelated to any of the other victims. Now, what I most likely was discussing is the fact that for a while they thought that Jane Doe number 6 and baby Jane Doe were related because of the proximity in which their bodies were found, which I believe is actually about 200 yards roughly. But Jane Doe number 6 has since been identified as Valerie Mack, and as I said, she is not the mother of baby Jane Doe, but yes, definitely baby Jane Doe is the daughter of one of the victims. There must be some miscommunication there. Kelly Evans says, I was thinking that this was a snuff ring myself, although I've never seen that anywhere. It seems odd that the doctor called to say that he gave her medicine, a sedative no less, from what I've read. Don't know if it's true or not. I think Shannon died from getting lost in the thicket. I mean, you gotta wonder, what on earth is Peter Hackett doing if he's gonna call Murray Gilbert and say that he runs a home for wayward girls and he gave Shannon a sedative? And it appears that that phone call did take place. It appears that she did file a wrongful death lawsuit against him. It appears that he had some type of contact with Shannon on the night that she went missing, but did he actually murder her? It's so hard to tell because Dr. Peter Hackett was a liar. I don't know if you call him a pathological liar or a chronic liar or just a bullshitter, so to speak. So it really is quite different. But we have another comment, actually, about Dr. Peter Hackett from CS, who says, I also believe Dr. Peter Hackett was a private doctor to the elite of Long Island, getting paid by them rather than going to the hospital. Well, I would hope that there's at least some credibility to the fact that Joe Brewer and Peter Hackett didn't have communication, but who knows. CS also shares a theory. I believe the killer evolved and changed his method from Jessica Taylor in Manorville. It was too bloody for his first kill, so he changed it up to strangle instead. Well, the Long Island serial killer, according to the authorities, was operating well before the murder of Jessica Taylor, which took place in 2003. The first confirmed victim, as I said, was the Fire Island Jane Doe, who was murdered in 1996. Allegedly. And at this time, I would like to turn it over to you guys. What do you think was happening with the Long Island serial killer mystery? Do you believe that this is a case of a single serial killer who started out by murdering and dismembering the victims and discarding their bodies, and then either got older or thought it was unnecessary, or simply just didn't care to dismember them anymore and just began discarding their bodies without any mutilations? Or do you believe that it was two serial killers, that there's a Manorville butcher who operated in the late 90s, and then there was the Long Island serial killer who has become more famous? Do you think they're two different people? Or do you think it's like that snuff ring where there's some type of thrill kill club involving who knows how many serial killers? So I guess the real question is, what do you think? One, two, or many? But I would like to say rest in peace to all of the victims. And this is a truly horrific case. And I talk a lot about the Zodiac Killer, like I said, every Monday, but with the Long Island serial killer, just the atrocities that were done to these women and the way that the killer handled their bodies and the decapitations, I never get used to it. It's absolutely sickening, and it's saddening, too, and you just can only guess what would drive somebody to do this. And the other final challenge question I would ask you is, what do you think happened with Dr. Peter Hackett? Is he a criminal? Is he a liar? Some combination of the both? Or is he just a really bad actor who inserted himself in the story like he has many other times? I mean, you can weigh in the comment section down below. Anything is welcome. Sometimes I do a little bit of guesswork. Other times I can actually go with a more basic narrative. And to be very frank with you guys, I think that my observations in this case definitely seem to be more in line with the authorities. I'm not jumping around too much or making too many controversial statements. As of now, I would have to say one killer, and for some reason chose to stop dismembering the bodies, and I simply do not think that they have enough evidence to connect victims such as Peaches, Jane Doe, Cherries, and the baby Jane Doe to the Long Island serial killer, but I do think that they were indeed victims. It's just the physical evidence has been destroyed by the elements, for lack of a better term. Please weigh in the comment section down below, and I will see you guys over on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.